Okay, everybody. Okay, let's talk about IRAs. Okay, and this is a very, very interesting concept. A lot of you probably know a lot of the things, or some of the things I'm going to talk about here tonight. But they talk about it, but nobody ever does anything. And I think the real reason is because most people, unless you're a large investor, you don't have a track to run on. And it's like, you know what? It's just more trouble than it's worth. You know, I don't know how it all works. And so I'm just going to leave my IRA where it's at. And so I think tonight I'm going to give you an overview of IRAs. We're not going to get into the weeds, as I call it, too much tonight. But next month, we are going to have a speaker on about IRAs and give you more details of what you could invest into, et cetera, et cetera. But tonight is just to get you really kind of riled up that you need to be doing something different with your IRA than you're doing already, okay? Okay, so how does it really work, okay? Well, first of all, if you don't work it, like this little cartoon here, everybody's going to be back in the pool, right? The labor pool. And, you know, that's not a fun place to be when you should be, you know, maybe spending time with your family and friends and whoever. And now you got to go back and find a part-time job just to kind of fill in the gap that Social Security is not picking up. So this is serious stuff, even though I try to make it a little humorous here. It's a very serious subject. Okay, so the plain and simple truth, ladies and gentlemen, is an IRA is actually pretty simple. People make it out to be more than it is, and also people think, well, if I invest my IRA into a real estate or a piece of real estate, I'm going to get audited. That is stinking thinking. Okay, that will not happen because you invest your IRA into a piece of real estate. Yes, there are certain things that you have to go through and follow, but there's like that on any property that you buy, okay? If you do a conventional loan compared to an FHA, there's a different set of circumstances, correct? All right, and so it's the same thing when you use your IRA, all right? So here are the main points. How does an IRA work for you? And get prepared here to decide if it would work for you. So what is an IRA? Obviously, we all know it's an individual retirement plan here where an individual can set up an investment account that receives special preferential tax treatment. You can actually open it up for like $1,000 if you want to, okay? So what can you invest as far as your IRA into? You can actually invest it into stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, obviously is what we would be talking about because we're not financial planners. We're real estate practitioners only. And so we need to make that clear. Basically, it works like this. You transfer money from your checking or savings into your IRA account. As of 2015, you can put $5,500 if you're younger than 50 and $6,500 if you're 50 or older, that you can go and contribute to that. Basically, at the end of the year, when you file your income tax, your taxable income is reduced by that amount that you contributed to your IRA. In other words, the money you contribute is tax deductible and you do not owe taxes on it, okay? Any of you that have a plan at your work, you definitely should be taking advantage of that as well as you can have an individual IRA, okay? Because these are dollars you don't get taxed on. Now, what does that mean? It means basically, if I make $5,000 and I end up paying, let's say, $2,000 income tax, well, now I can only invest $3,000. In this case, you can invest the full $5,000. That doesn't seem like a lot, but if you compound that over 15, 20, 30 years, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in difference. So, like I tell everybody, nobody thinks you're ever going to be 65, but you will. Unfortunately. Okay. So the other thing of it is your investments grow tax-free as long as they remain in the IRA. Okay. And basically a traditional IRA works like this, basically that someday when you finally retire, the idea is you're going to be in a lower tax bracket okay, than you are today. And so when you pull that money out of your IRA, you're paying it at a lower tax rate than at a higher tax rate. So you might be at 50% between federal and state now if you live in California, okay, but maybe at retirement you're only at 22%. Okay, so it's a lot difference as far as in terms of what you're going to pay out in income taxes. Next question here is, can I have a traditional IRA if my employer has one for you? You can, but you may not be able to deduct it from your income taxes. So that's something that we would have one of the custodians go ahead and answer for each of you individually. Okay. A lot of people ask, what is a Roth IRA? It actually works opposite from your traditional IRA, and it's where you pay income taxes each year as you go, but not when you retire. And that's really unusual because if you think about it, the odds are you're going to be in a higher bracket now than you're going to be at retirement. So I really am not a big fan of the Roth IRA, but there are some other, special things that you can do with the Roth that you can't do with others. So that's something that each individual can look at. Okay. Your investments will still grow tax-free, and like I say, if you think you're going to be in a higher tax bracket of retirement, maybe, okay, it works for you. Okay. Now, how do you get your money back from an IRA? Basically, with the Roth IRA, you're required to keep the money in until you're 59 and a half, or you pay a 10% penalty. Traditional IRA, you can actually wait until 70 and a half before you take it out. But if you don't take it out, then you will face penalties. Okay. And so your financial planner, they would set that up based on your whole financial situation, from your income, your retirement from the company you work for, etc. All that has to be worked out. So the closer you get to retirement, actually, you definitely need a financial planner. You actually need a financial planner way before you get to retirement. Okay. But at least at that point, you need to take that into some serious consideration there. Okay. So people are kind of confused. How does it work? Okay. Sometimes what happens is people will say, well, hey, I think I could buy this as my IRA. And so what they do is they go out, they get a real estate agent like Christy or Tyler. They go out and buy a property and they put a deposit down of $10,000. And they say, now I'm going to use my IRA to buy the property. Well, when you wrote that personal check, okay, to the real estate agent or the escrow, you use regular funds. And when you did that, you disqualified yourself from buying that with your IRA. Okay. So it has to be done and set up first. So what is the process to set up your IRA? Okay. First one is basically it's yourself. We set you up with a custodian. Okay. And they set up your IRA. And so once it's set up with your custodian, which we can provide for you, okay, then basically you get a checkbook, so to speak. Okay. And at that point, now you can get a hold of Tyler or Chrissy and go out and buy that property and give them a check for the deposit. And now you're on the right track. Okay. And you can go over here now and you can go ahead and end up buying that piece of real estate. Okay. So that's the process. You can see it's not real difficult. You just have to have the resources and the know-how as far as how it all works. But it's not as difficult as people make it out to be. People make it out like it's like you got to go to school to learn how to work on this. No, you don't. Okay, not at all. Okay. Now, what is the difference between investing with your IRA compared to regular investing? You cannot use regular monies for anything. You can't use it to fix up the house, repairs. You can't use it to pay property taxes, insurance. The IRA must stand on its own. And should you use outside money to do that, you will disqualify that IRA. And you don't want that to happen. Okay. And we require a minimum of $25,000 in reserves for each property that we have investors go into, and people say, well, do you pay all cash? Well, we recommend, if you're new to the IRA market and if you have the ability to do it, is to pay cash for the rental property. Okay. And you always try to buy newer type properties compared to older. Why is that? Well, a house that's 60 years old is going to take 4 times the maintenance than a house that's 10 years old. Does that make sense to everybody? I mean, it's pretty common, right? Stuff hasn't wore out yet, right? Okay. And so because you cannot write off on your taxes repairs or improvements, or even your property taxes or insurance, if it's inside your IRA. Okay. And everybody goes, well, why would I want to do it? There's still reasons why, and we'll get into that. Okay. But the bottom line of it is you must go ahead and have hands off. You cannot use regular funds with that. Now you can leverage in some cases up to 65% loan to value ratio. Okay. With reserve restrictions, which are normally 10% of the sales price. So if we're buying a property for $500,000, we would have to put 35% down. Okay. But then we would have to have at least another 10% or 50,000 in reserve. Okay. Now, why do they do that? Because they know you could have a vacancy, right? Okay. If you have a vacancy, if you have an eviction, like that's Kristen's wheelhouse, right? She's the eviction expert. Okay. Or you have repairs, you have a slab leak or whatever the case may be. Okay. And so those are things that have to be looked at in advance. Okay. But if you do, you can get a 65% LTV ratio. Now, a lot of people in their IRAs, sometimes they're making, let's say it was an all cash deal. And let's say you're making a 5% cash on cash return, or that would be equivalent if you had your money in a mutual fund, you're making a 5% on your mutual fund in your IRA. Okay. Okay. So you think, what's 5% is 5%? Not so fast. Okay. Because with real estate, like last year, had you bought a house for $500,000, this year it'd be worth $650,000. And you still got the 5%. So not only are you getting the 5% cash on cash, but you're getting the appreciation upswing. You're never going to get that in a mutual fund, ever. Okay. And that's the real beauty of looking at some of these things compared to just leaving it set in something that you may have now. A lot of you may not even be making 5. You might be making 2. Okay. And the other thing of it is all rents must go into the IRA, not your personal account. Okay. You could not go ahead and have it go into your personal account. That will disqualify it. So as rents increase, guess what? All those rent increases have to go back into the IRA. Okay. And so that's a beautiful thing, because that means you're always going to have money for repairs, because you're not squandering that money away. Where in regular investing, you don't have to have a separate account, even though from our past webinars, we strongly encourage that you have a separate checking investment account. We call it the piggy bank, right? You don't want to be breaking into your own piggy bank. So what are the 5 secrets how your IRA and retirement plans can create wealth? Well, first of all, there's no capital gains when you sell. So like in the normal world, if I have a property that went from 100,000 to 500,000, now I want to exchange that property into another property, okay, through a 1031 exchange vehicle, I have certain restrictions that I have to comply with. Or if I don't meet those restrictions, okay, then I have to pay long-term capital gains. Right now, that's 20%. So if I had, for easy numbers, and you got depreciation and recapture and all this, but we're not going to get into those weeds. But just if you had a $400,000 gain at 20%, that's $80,000, right? That you would have to owe in long-term capital gains if you outright sold that property or didn't meet the exchange criteria. If you have it in your IRA, you can sell it and you don't get hit with capital gains. Okay. It just sits there. And so if it takes you 6 months to find another property to buy, your money's just sitting in a cash account until you find the property. Okay. So that makes it nice, and it takes you out of a pressure cooker. And sometimes 1031s can be a little testy. I know that personally. I've done a lot of them. Okay. Okay. Second, you can't touch the money for your own use. So like I say, you can't squander it away along the way. Okay. Because that happens to a lot of our clients. Am I right, Kristen? Okay. Yes. We see it every day in property management. We raise your rent $200 a month, goes into your personal account. All of a sudden you find out, oh, I got a little extra money. But little do you know that money should not be used for personal. It should be back in that checking investment account, because that water heater is going to go someday. We just don't know when, but we know it's coming, right? And so that's a beautiful thing about the IRA. The money has to go back into the IRA. Okay. You don't have to pay tax on the money you make now, and you can reinvest it to even make more money. So as that rent increases, that money coming in, you don't have to pay tax on that. It goes back into the IRA. You with me? And so then you can take that money combined with other money that you've been putting in each year in your IRA, and you buy another property. And it just keeps going on and on. You have to use a property management company. So I guess that's good news for us, but it's actually good news for you too. And let me share with you why. Okay. I'm going to use my younger brother as an example here. Okay. When he first bought properties, and even after he had properties back in the Midwest in Nebraska, he was just livid that he could not spend more than, let's say, $8 for a faucet or not a faucet, but a toilet assembly or something. And so he would go out and spend a couple hours at Home Depot trying to find the best faucet at the best price. So at the end of the day, maybe he saves $15, right? Okay. But in the meantime, okay, what he should have been doing, he should have been studying the financial markets, how he can get his interest rates from 4.5 to 2.5, like Mr. John Marble did on 2 properties a few webinars back, where he saved $120,000 over 30 years, right? So what I'm saying is, why is it good for you? Because it forces you not to play property manager. And it forces you to do what you really need to be doing, which is becoming knowledgeable and educated on all aspects of your investment property. Give you another example right now. Just today, in looking at my own insurance on just one property, I come to find out that they had it overinflated, and I'm paying $400 more a year than I should be paying for the same insurance for the same coverage. Okay. Now I'm working on my investment properties, right? I'm not working in it down at Home Depot trying to save $8. I hope that makes sense to you guys. But this here is a virtue, because it forces you cannot rent the property. Okay. You cannot do the repairs. Okay. And it's going to force you to go ahead and have, whether it be management one or some other management company, it's going to force you to go ahead and relieve the management responsibilities. Lastly, this big secret is your employer matches for free what you put in. Even today, it boggles my mind, because we do it in the company here too, is some of the staff that don't take advantage of this. Okay. So if they put in 100, we match it up to a certain percent. But it's like, if somebody gives you 100, or if you make $100 today, then I give you another 100. Why wouldn't you go to work that day? Right? It's like I'm getting 2 days in one. Okay. And so all I'm saying is take advantage of your employer. I don't care what it is. Okay. And I don't care what else you have to give up. Because if you put years, you can go on the internet and you can put in, type in Google and put in compounding calculator, compounding interest calculator. And it can roll the years ahead. And you need to be sitting down, because sometimes those numbers, you're going to think you made a mistake, because you're going to get hundreds of thousands of dollars, not 1,000 or 2. So make certain that you take advantage of that. But those are the 5 key areas as far as working with your IRA to really create some serious wealth.